What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. Here it is Monday, November 21st, 2016, start of a brand new week, heading into the Thanksgiving holiday here. And let me just get a couple of things set up, because we were a little late getting our connection, and I have to move things around on the screen. There we go. We're all set to go. All right, it is Monday, and a couple of quick program notes. First of all, a reminder, we're live today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. And on Thursday and Friday, our overworked and underpaid control room personnel are getting the day off. And so it'll be repeat shows. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us on Wednesday instead of Friday to share some time with us all. And obviously we're getting into the Thanksgiving holiday, and everybody's out there doing the turkey thing, or here in Hawaii we're grabbing extra pineapples or whatever, and unwilling to let us have any kind of relaxation from the constant scaremongering going on. The FBI has issued an alert to police to beware of Thanksgiving terror attacks at shopping malls and special events. Well, if you took at those riots at Black Friday, I think the terrorists are going to stay away because they don't want to get hurt in those things. Boy, I got to tell you, those riots at the shopping malls for Black Friday, they make the Black Lives Matter people look downright peaceful and respectable. So, and again, there's no specific threat. There's no evidence. This is just the FBI out there saying, we want you worried. We want to keep up the fear-mongering even through the holidays there. Now, obviously, yesterday was the anniversary of John F. Kennedy, and looks like my watch is giving up the ghost here. There we go. Everything's breaking down. My iPhone was down most of the day yesterday. Anyway, so it was the anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And here we are all these years later, and pretty much every American understands that Warren report was a complete fiction. And it's just a reminder that the same corporate media that is out there screaming about the fake news over at the independent media websites are the ones who back in 1963 told you, oh yes, it was just a crazed lone gunman, there were magic bullets, and you should never ever question anything that the corporate media tells you. Which, of course, now we know a lot different. We're sadder but wiser. We're more skeptical. And that, of course, means we're more free. Beliefs are chains used to hold free minds enslaved. And that's what the corporate media has been doing. They fill you with a lot of beliefs that get you to do what the government and corporations want you to do. Now, getting into President-elect Donald Trump, he's already starting to put together his plans for the White House. He's announced some more of his cabinet appointments. Everybody's complaining about it left and right. And again, anybody who thought Donald Trump was going to make you 100% happy, well, you were kind of living in a dream world anyway. And in my case, certainly Donald Trump on his very, very worst day is still going to be far better than Hillary Clinton on her best day. But Donald Trump is keeping his word to rein in government spending out of control. There's going to be a freeze on hiring, an end to automatic raises, and a green light to fire poor performers, because one of the problems government has, once you're inside that government system, it is very difficult to fire you even if you're doing nothing useful at all. And we've had all these scandals about people who just sit around all day looking at porn on their taxpayer-funded computers, and they can't be fired. Well, Donald Trump is going to end that and get the pensions under control, which have been the bane of so many city and state governments around the country. Now, as you know, Vice President-elect Mike Pence went to see the Broadway show Hamilton and was booed from the audience and lectured from the stage by one of the cast members. And Thomas Bogar, who's a Maryland-based author of American Presidents Attend the Theater, saying, this has never happened before, where the cast of a play gets up and presumes to criticize, in this case, the vice president before he's even taken office. Now, I've trod the boards myself in the past, but I have a comment for the cast of Hamilton. And first of all, you need to keep in mind, that this version of Hamilton is already under severe criticism by playing very fast and loose with the historical reality in order to try and put out some political spin out there. But as for the cast of Hamilton, kindly remember, you are actors. Playing in Hamilton does not make you Hamilton, any more than playing a doctor on TV qualifies you to take out an appendix. Everybody on that stage is an entertainer. They are not analysts. They spend all their time at play acting and very little in the actual study of how our society works. Like tragically too many Americans, they just grab whatever soundbite that whizzes by their ears from the corporate media, and they play act like they know what's really going on. And dear cast members, you don't. And I learned this when I was last in Hollywood myself, and I tried to talk to many of the people about what was really going on in the Clintons, only to have parroted at me whatever was being said on TV news just the night before. Now, since my blacklisting from Hollywood, I have spent more than 2 decades in the full-time study of the real workings of the nation, which is why I speak from an informed position when I tell you that you actors don't really have a clue about what is going on the other side of your makeup. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about politics this hour, and a quick reminder, today through Wednesday, our radio shows are live. Thursday and Friday are holidays and replay shows, since you didn't hear the announcement at the top of the show. Now, Bernie Sanders has come on out, and he's dropped a little bit of a bombshell. He's actually sort of indirectly come to the defense of FBI Director James Comey by saying the reason Hillary lost is they simply ignored the economic realities of the average American who were being pummeled by departing jobs, lowered wages and salaries, Obamacare, talk of a carbon tax, and that was really a big part of what was going on. And James Comey's FBI investigation was really a minor point. And you do need to remember that if Hillary and her people had been following all the rules and regulations and laws, there would not have been an FBI investigation to begin with. But in classic liberal politician style, everybody wants to find a scapegoat. They refuse to accept responsibility for their own bad decisions. Peter Van Buren is out there saying that essentially a big mistake the Hillary campaign made was they underestimated the impact of the leaked emails coming out of the Democratic National Committee, Hillary's campaign, John Podesta. They just had a group think that, well, it's really too complex for average Americans to follow along. They're really not paying attention to that. And they were wrong on that one. Story coming out of Russia Insider. Liberals gave us 30 years of foreign policy insanity. No wonder voters rejected them. And it wasn't just foreign policy insanity. The New World Order, the Project for the New American Century, it was also the economy. Now, it's interesting to note Russia Insider using the time interval of 30 years, because that is about the time the U.S. government was hijacked by these drug lords involved with the CIA's smuggling of weapons into Nicaragua and funded by cocaine smuggled back into the U.S. into Arkansas under then-Governor Bill Clinton. That's where all of this stuff tracks back to, the Iran-Contra gun and drug-running operation. Now, Bev Harris over at Black Box Voting is saying there is considerable amount of evidence that the Hillary campaign did, in fact, steal votes during the general election, but like the Brexit vote, it wasn't enough to stop the Trump landslide. In fact, if you look at a voting map by county, you will see that Trump covered the entire nation, better than Verizon. Hillary's successes were exclusively in these very, very tightly compacted urban areas, which are the places where the election riggers like to operate. Lots of fodder to play with. They don't have to run around huge amounts of territory. Just everybody's clustered together. Okay, let's see now. I seem to be having some kind of sound difficulties here. Testing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Is that better? Okay. I'm not sure what's going on here, but my sound is fading out here. Or maybe I'm going deaf. I don't know. Now, another article that is coming out of Gilad Atzmon, and he writes a lot of very, very good stuff. And he says, The United States of Detachment is the name of this article. And basically saying that the liberals in general, and Hillary's people in particular, were absolutely delusional. And he's going back to this revelation that was in the Washington Post on the 9th of November, that Hillary and her campaign had allowed a computer program named Aiea, after Lady Ada Lovelace, who was the world's first computer programmer. She wrote code for Babbage's mechanical calculator. And Aiea was how the Hillary campaign ran everything. They made all the decisions on the basis of this software. I don't know, maybe they got it from the same place they got the Obamacare website. And obviously, despite 400,000 simulations a day, they made serious, serious mistakes. And getting back to it, simply failed to hear what the American people were actually saying and relying instead on what the computer was assuming. Computers are not always right just because they're computers. In fact, programmers will tell you about the Geigo law, garbage in, garbage out. And it affects not only Hillary's campaign planning, or lack thereof, but also ClimateGate. All these computer programs saying humans are warming the earth are only as good as the first data and software fed into it. Okay. Now, good news. Jason Chaffetz is out there saying that the congressional investigations into the crimes of Hillary Clinton are going to be continuing. Her private email server scandal, the mishandling of classified material, and I think they're both overlapped, the pay-to-play schemes with the Clinton Foundation. She has committed serious, serious crimes, and the fact that she's no longer a political candidate is not a reason to back off on it. Now, since the election, there has been a noticeable decline in donations to the Clinton Foundation. Basically, Hillary doesn't have a product to sell anymore. Now, overall, this year, donations to the Clinton Foundation fell by 37%, the vast majority of it after the election. Just those cash flows just dried right up. In fact, we're hearing that Norway is reducing its contribution to the Clinton Foundation next year by 87%. I'm predicting next year the foundation itself will shut down in order to avoid investigation. Oh, you can't investigate us. We went out of business. We destroyed all the records. There's nothing to see here. That's what they're going to do. Now, Barack Obama has been approached about possibly pardoning Edward Snowden, and he made an interesting comment, and he may not have thought it all the way through, or he is sending a message to Hillary Clinton. Obama came on out and said, quote, I can't pardon somebody who hasn't gone before a court and presented themselves, so that's not something that I would comment on at this point. This in the context of Edward Snowden, who has not, in fact, seen a court trial yet. But this means that all of these Hillary supporters who are saying that Obama can just write out a blanket pardon right now, Obama just said, no, I can't. No court trial, no pardon. And that is the way a pardon is supposed to work. You are supposed to be able to have your day in court, be convicted, then you can apply for a pardon. And that's how it's supposed to work. Gerald Ford's blanket pardon of Richard Nixon was illegal and unconstitutional, but nobody kicked up a fuss because everybody in Washington, D.C. wanted that Watergate investigation to go away before the links to the John F. Kennedy assassination surfaced. So everybody went along and said, oh, yes, it was a good thing Gerald Ford did. Our long national nightmare is over. Just shut it down before really, really nasty stuff comes on out. When Richard Nixon was recorded on his White House taping system, he kept using the phrase, the Cuba thing. And later on, it came on out that that was his oblique way of referring to the Kennedy assassination. Because he knew he was being recorded, and he needed to be careful even in the Oval Office. Now, the watchdog group Citizens United is suing the State Department for all Clinton communications between the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. Now, Hillary Clinton has tried to maintain this illusion that as Secretary of State, she was completely isolated from the Clinton Foundation. We know now that that was completely false because of all of these emails that have been leaked so far that show the State Department coordinating with the Clinton Foundation, with some of these people openly saying the people making donations to the Clinton Foundation did so in the expectation they would get favors from the U.S. State Department. Now, the State Department, or rather the Department of Justice, Department of Injustice under Loretta Lynch, requested all of the State Department Clinton emails to be sealed until 2018 to protect her good buddy. But Citizens United is suing, saying there is no legitimate grounds to seal these records away from the public. Technically, everything produced by an employee of the government at taxpayer expense, on the taxpayer clock, on taxpayer computers, is a public record. The only exceptions are classified military secrets, which these are not. Nothing about the operation of the Clinton Foundation justifies being classified. Now, we're still hearing that electors are being threatened and harassed, including death threats, to not vote for Donald Trump and vote for Hillary Clinton. And they're going public now. It's over in Arizona. Down in Texas, one of their electors came out with what I think is a really good response. Go to heck. Actually, that's not the word that he used. But he says his colleagues, all of the electors in Texas, are getting death threats. That if they vote for Donald Trump, they and their families will be killed. Now, here's the problem. Hillary's people have made this threatening of the Electoral College a public display. Everybody knows it's going on. This, in turn, creates a political climate in which if the Electoral College votes for anybody other than Trump, it will be seen by the public as illegitimate, the result of thuggery. And they won't accept it. Now, there are some Republicans in the Electoral College who are talking about a compromise candidate. They are not going to vote for Donald Trump, but they can't quite bring themselves to vote for Hillary Clinton. So they're actually talking about convincing most of the electors to switch over and vote for John Kasich. Now, that's a long shot. That I don't really think is going to happen. All righty. Now then, okay. There is something not right here with my sound setup. I'll have to debug it later. Piers Morgan is out there. He's talking about that cast of the Hamilton taking Pence to task, and he says, well, you know, okay, but why didn't any of these stars on Broadway lecture Hillary and Obama when they were being bigots and attending shows? And that's a valid question. Now, there's an article over in The Guardian, The New Special Relationship, What Does Putin Want from Trump? And there's a lot of Russia-Putin bashing going on right now. I've just been reminded that JFK died on November 22nd, which is tomorrow. My bad. So The Guardian is out there, and this is clearly a biased push piece here. The unlikely love-in between the president-elect and a former KGB agent who built a career on hating America has spooked many U.S. allies, blah, 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 blah. Career of hate? I'm sorry, look who's been bashing and demonizing Russia for the last few years and how many Western political and journalistic careers were built on that campaign of hate. Now, it's been very obvious that the U.S. misses the glory days of the Cold War of the 1950s and 1960s when all they had to do was wag commie at the American people and we would just throw our money and our children into war after war after war. Now, we're going to take a break for commercials. I'm going to finish up on this after we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're trying to deal with some of our technical issues that are plaguing us right now. We're also having a bunch of news come on in. They just had a magnitude 7.3 earthquake over by Japan, fairly close to the remains of the Fukushima nuclear reactor. So this one probably rattled all of that debris underground, and who knows what's going to happen from that one. We're also getting a report I'm looking into where apparently some Ukrainian operatives have now kidnapped Russian soldiers inside Crimea. They're still trying to provoke a confrontation with Russia before Donald Trump can take office. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Now, let's get on back to this story here from The Guardian. More Russia bashing about how Putin is a former KGB agent who built a career on hating Americans. Remember when George Herbert Walker Bush was president? Nobody ever talked about his former career as a CIA agent. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But the career of hate, like I said, it's very obvious the United States misses those glory days of the Cold War when they could wag commies at us and get us to fling our money and our children at their wars. Just give the flag a snappy salute, and we're going to just do what we're told to do because we're afraid of the commies, and they want to get back to that with all this fear-mongering about the Russians. And it's equally obvious that rather than spend the American people's tax money on the American people, the U.S. government wants to revive that Cold War to go on plundering the taxpayers and feeding their favorite defense contractors who, in exchange, make lavish contributions to political campaigns of the war hawks. This is the very essence of the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower tried to warn us all about. And as a result, the U.S. spends more on weapons than the next 26 nations put together, 25 of whom are supposed to be allies. One need only look at the list of who is invading, drone striking, and overthrowing whom for the last 15 years to see who the real aggressor is, who's the real threat to world peace. They're still pushing this agenda of war with Russia, war with Russia. We've got to have a war with Russia. Now, apparently, police are now raising a concern that the principal of Pittsburgh High School was participating in an anti-Trump rally, and the principal and his school administrators are out there saying, well, he was just there in the interest of public safety, and the police are saying, no, he was taking an active part, which may be a violation of the school district's rules. But they're still out there pushing this, and from the fact that my server is still under attack, it's clear that there is a cadre of people somewhere who still think they're going to be able to steal the White House for Queen Hillary I. Now then, in the subject of fake news versus real news, remember back at Bowling Green State University, there was this black female student who claimed that she was attacked by 3 white male Donald Trump supporters, attacking her on campus, and that she was out there all over Facebook. Look what these Trump people are doing. It's racism, blah, 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 blah. But oddly enough, she never contacted the police to report the attack. The police were called by her father, who tried to call her after reading the Facebook post and couldn't reach her. And so he called the police, and the police called the girl, and she said, well, yeah, okay. And she filed a report. Well, it's come out, it was a complete hoax. She made it up. She's now being charged for filing a false police report. But it's again, it shows the character of Hillary's supporters. They think it's perfectly okay to go on out and play hoaxes, hack servers, lie, cheat, steal. They think it makes them superior people. No, it doesn't. It just makes them ordinary people willing to lie, cheat, and steal. Now, over at Williams College, there was another vandalizing situation that seemed to be Trump supporters at Griffin Hall, and 2 of the students have now admitted that they did it. It was another hoax, another fake. Now, Obama has actually said one thing he wants to do before leaving office in 60 days is he's going to destroy that independent media. Those people, they make it impossible for us to lie, and we can't run this country unless we lie. We might actually have to represent the will of the people. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Land Rover in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. It's good to speak to you again. The question that has been ruminating in my mind over the last few days, I've read reports from or looked at headlines from your site suggesting that Donald Trump is going to fire Loretta Lynch or will. Can he actually do that before he's president?
No, basically on January 20th, when he goes on in, his picks for these offices, for a new attorney general, for example, will go into the office, and the existing personnel will basically they know it's the end of their time in that office.
So he can't do it prior to the 20th.
No, he can't. He can't. But everybody knows it's coming.
All right. Thanks very much, and love your show, and listen to it frequently, well, every day. And you're doing a superb job. Been following you for a number of years now, and will continue to do so.
Well, thank you very much, and I know a lot of people in Canada do listen to this show and listen to me when I'm on Jim Goddard's show out of Vancouver. And so thank you very much for the kind words, and we're going to let you go here. And moving right along here, let's get into this issue about the fake news, because we have this ludicrous image of a corporate media that has continually kept the American people in a matrix of lies, fraud, and deception for decades, for our entire lifetime, and all of a sudden, they're on the warpath against the independent media because we're spoiling their party. They're telling the people the truth. And if we can't lie, we're not going to make the big bucks, because that's what we're paid the big bucks to do, to lie. Nobody's willing to write $1 million salaries for somebody who's going to tell you the truth. The media, corporate media doesn't want to change. Because if the corporate media changed into a true fact news reporting organization, their heavy financial backers are going to go away and say, just survive on the advertising money. So we have this article out of Gumshoe News, a comment on fake news. Who are the fakers? And the more the corporate media screams about fake news, the more everybody stands up and say, hey, we remember when you lied to us about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, or Assad's weapons of mass destruction, or the Lusitania or anything. They just go down the whole litany. But what's going on is the corporate media has been in decline for quite some time, and especially in the aftermath of the election. Their fortunes are on a downturn, to put it delicately, and what they need is they need a scapegoat. They need somebody to blame. We didn't do anything wrong. We haven't lied to the public. Maybe we've made a little tiny eensy-teensy mistake here and there, and when we said Saddam had nuclear weapons, we're only reporting what the political leadership said. It's not up to us to go out and double-check the claims made by the government. Actually, yes, it is. Have you never heard the expression, the watchdog on government abuse? Because that's the contract. That's the reason there is that First Amendment, is to give the press the right and the ability to criticize the government without fear of retaliation. And the corporate media has abandoned that. They'll take advantage of the First Amendment anytime that they can, but they don't want to be bothered reporting on government corruption. They'll lose their ticket on Air Force One. Now, Keith Olbermann, who I used to have a lot of respect for, he's out there in hysterics. He's demanding that everybody boycott Alex Jones advertisers. Says that Donald Trump's going to have concentration camps to hold all these illegal immigrants. Well, maybe, but only until we can fling them back over the border. They're trying to draw parallels now between Trump's wanting secure borders and the internment of the Japanese during World War II. And that's not what's going on here. When the Japanese were interred during World War II, it was with the understanding they'd be allowed to go back to their lives in this country when they were let go. This is a completely different situation. These are people who aren't supposed to be here in the first place. Every time somebody says you're racist because you're opposed to the illegal immigrants, hey, illegal isn't a race. Ron Paul is out there calling out the fake news sources and the journalists. He's got his own list out there, and it's all the corporate media. And don't forget WikiLeaks. They came on out with all of these 65 top executives and talking heads of the corporate media, who were all buddy-buddy with John Podesta and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Oh, they wanted to party with the elites. They were just looking forward to their access to the Hillary Clinton White House. Now they're all scrambling. The Washington Post came out with an article for the new yellow journalists' opportunities comes in clicks and bucks. And they're basically grabbing one of the most abusive websites out there. Let's be honest, not everybody in the independent media is trying to do a good job. Some are just there for the bucks and for the instant fame. And the Washington Post basically picked one of the worst abusers out there in the independent media and holds them up as the example for all the independent media. Now, if the Washington Post reported on a black man who stole a car and then used it to imply that all black men are car thieves, I wonder what the reaction would be. Now, the corporate media needs to own up to the fact that the reason they're in trouble is because of all the lies. Telling us Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. Assad had weapons of mass destruction. No more snowfalls after 2000 because you humans are warming the earth. Hillary is winning by 12 points. A little radiation is good for you. The actual track record of the corporate media is fraud after fraud after fraud after fraud after fraud. Exploding GM side-mounted gas tanks, the Food Lion scandal. Their career of lying has come back to haunt them. So now they're moaning the rise of the independent media. And they don't seem to understand. We only exist because they weren't doing their job. Their lies created the need for an independent media. Corporate media created us. We're their children, if you think about it. And eventually all children grow up to outstrip the parents. Let's take a phone call. Mike in Kentucky. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I think a lot of people kind of might grasp the concept if they've ever seen one of those big, double throw breakers, like you go on a stage or something and you ka-ching and throw the power onto all the lighting system or something. I think that's what they kind of need to think about when they're transitioning from one president to another, or one chief executive to another, or one, what does he call themselves also, Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy. When that switch occurs, it becomes an entirely different government. And I remember in the 90s a young person's history book that had Harry S. Truman had his press secretary drafted a memo to recognize the state of Israel, and he edited it. After the press secretary wrote it, he just went through there and started marking out stuff. And I think I'd find a silver dollar to give somebody if I could find one of those books, because the copies that are online do not look the same. He marked out, instead of the United States of America recognizes the state of Israel, he marked out the United States and wrote in this government.
Yes.
And then he wrote put a caret and put in de facto beside of the state of Israel.
Well, the other thing he did was there was a comment in the original press statement about Israel being a nation for the Jewish people, and Trump struck that out. I actually have a scan of that image here. I want to step back though. First of all, nobody does a big ka-chunk with the breakers on a stage because you can damage the lighting equipment. I know. I did a lot of theater lighting when I was in college. And unfortunately, while Donald Trump and his new top executives are going to signal a change in the government, the vast majority of the people in the government are going to be continuing from the Obama years into the Trump years, and there's going to be a very noticeable inertia where they're going to be dragging their feet on certain things. And that's why I keep saying anybody who thinks Trump winning the election is automatically going to make things better, it's not going to happen. We're already seeing how Songbird McCain is out there still saying, don't you dare be friends with Russia. Don't you be friends with Putin. We worked hard to get this war, and you shouldn't take it away from us. And they're out there trying to basically bludgeon him or browbeat him into going along with the continuance of the agenda that we've had. But when John F. Kennedy wrote his executive order to break up the CIA, it was never really implemented. Everybody just sort of dragged their feet and said, well, we need to send it out to legal and circulate it around. And there's a lot of institutional inertia that Donald Trump is going to have to overcome. And how he's going to have to overcome it, it's going to be a top-down situation. Now, he's changed the top. Now we got to work on Congress. And that's where you and I and the rest of the American people come into play, because we've got to stand shoulder to shoulder with Donald Trump and glare through those glass windows in the front of the offices of the senators and representatives and send them a signal. You know, you start working for we the American people, or we're going to do to you next election what we just got done doing to Hillary Clinton. Got to keep up the momentum on that. And after Congress gets more and more in line, we'll start to see the rest of official Washington sort of shrug and say, all right, well, I guess this is the new policy.
Well, what I was getting at is that started me noticing other things. This press release that Harry Truman notified, or, kind of edited, and I found one copy of it that actually he inserted the word provisional on and then changed it from new state to, quote, capital state of capital Israel. But I guess there's more than one version of it, because that's not the version I found. But what I noticed is you'll see a president being confronted by Congress over something, and over the years, just here and there, I've noticed he'll clarify it by saying, this government does such and such, or it is not the policy of this government, as if he's talking about the presidential administration as a separate government from Congress.
No, what he's talking about, what Truman was talking about, was that he avoided implying that he spoke for all of the American people, especially because he himself was a Democrat. So what he wanted to do is, his job was to be in charge of the government and express the government's policy, but he felt he was trespassing by stepping over the line and claiming to speak for all the American people, because certainly at that time there was a large part of the American people who even then were aware that the nation of Israel was being created by taking somebody else's nation away from them. Anyway, listen, the phone lines are loaded. I got to let you go. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, if you control the media, you control the message. So even if you get rid of a lot of people in Congress, man, you still got the military-industrial complex going through the media, and you got the AMA awards. They're reading off the script. Hollywood reads off the script. Where the heck are you supposed to go?
Well, see, here's the thing. The corporate media started losing its lock on the minds of America actually about 10 years ago. And the fact that they were so convinced they were going to put Hillary into the White House, apparently they were in a state of denial at just how influential the independent media has become. And now, of course, they're in a panic and they're overreacting and they're doing the knee-jerk reaction kind of thing. But the reality is the corporate media is not in control of the minds of America anymore. The American people realize that they have been living in a matrix. They've taken the red pill. They're waking up, whatever metaphor you want to use. And the corporate media is distrusted. The American people are now very skeptical, and they should be. Nobody should just blindly trust anything that's being told to them by somebody, because everybody who's out there is going to have their agenda, or they can make mistakes. I work very hard to try and keep my website on the straight and narrow, but I do make mistakes, and every once in a while I get suckered into running a bad story, but we just have to maintain our vigilance. But the corporate media is just now realizing the independent media is a force to be reckoned with. And it's not that we're taking their money away from them. We're never going to be rich the way those prostitutes and correspondents are, because they're paid to deceive the American public, and that's not what the independent media is about. And so what's happening, though, is they're realizing, though, that if they can't successfully control the minds of America, the people who underwrite their losses, and the corporate media is losing a lot of money right now, the people underwriting those losses are going to put away their checkbooks. That's why they're in a total panic. They've made their entire career and their wealth and position on the basis of being in charge of the minds of America, and they're losing it. And rather than admit it was their own malfeasances that broke the trust of the American public, they're looking for a scapegoat, and that scapegoat is the independent media.
What do you think of them rolling out George Takei? That just disgusted me at that point, Mike. With Sulu from Star Trek about the Japanese were registered. It's like, it's This is such a desperate attempt. Hey, Mike, I don't know if there was this woman on CNN. She said that she went up for a hike. You got to see the video. She went up for a hike, come back, her windshield was smashed on her car, and somebody put a note in there. Now, why wouldn't they just put it on the windshield wiper? You know, I mean, the woman, you can tell, was a fake. She was like really the worse acting than Sharknado 3. I mean, it was.
Ooh, that's bad.
It's bad though, Mike, because this is what they come to. I mean, either.
It's all they know how to do. It's all they know how to do. They don't know any other way to play the game. But hoaxes and false flags, and again, the egg timer applies. The amount of time it takes to expose one of these things, like this college girl claiming she was attacked by 3 Trump supporters, it can be clocked with an egg timer. And they don't know anything else to do. So all they do is they keep doing it, not realizing that as each new hoax is unmasked, their credibility crumbles that much further. They're in a death spiral right now. They don't realize it. They're just flopping around. Again, they're looking for a scapegoat. They can't accept responsibility for having destroyed themselves. Oh, it's got to be somebody else who did this to us. Those evil people at the independent media. How could they do this to us?
Hey, Mike, switching gears, I don't know, did you check out the trailer for Oliver Stone's for the Maidan in Ukraine?
No, I haven't yet. I haven't yet.
Yeah, it looks very, oh man, I can't wait till it comes out. I mean, it shows you the same nonsense that could be going on here. A purple revolution, I mean, it's possible. I wouldn't put anything past these people. It's not over yet, Mike.
Well, like the attempt to subvert the Electoral College, it's looking more and more like a long shot, except for Los Angeles and Portland, where the paychecks are still apparently flowing. The riots have quieted down. And again, the public image that was put out by these rioters was not sympathetic and did not win the public support. And without the public support, any kind of color revolution is doomed to fail. I mean, they came really close in Iran in 2009, and it still fell flat on its face. So right now, my worst worry is Trump being assassinated before December 19th. Got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take one more phone call. Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, there's a few things I wanted to go over. First off, before everybody says that Trump's going to, bring back the concentration camps, it wasn't Trump who suggested that. That was Hillary, and you can get it on YouTube.
Yes.
She said we need camps for adults. So, usually what they accuse Trump of, it's usually Hillary. But I want to agree on fake news. Remember that Gulf War deal when CNN did the fake incoming missiles from the top of their tower in Atlanta?
I'm having a hard time remembering that one. Were they dramatizing something?
And these two guys are putting on their helmets, and they had the siren going in the back.
Oh, yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, they weren't saying it was Atlanta. They were saying they were over in some place in the Middle East, and yeah, they
were in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and they were actually in Atlanta. Yeah, I saw that. I remember that one. Well, I mean, they've been caught a lot of times using green screen, and some of it they're not adjusting the green screen too well, and you actually see parts of the commentators fade from view.
Yeah, the computerization has to be dialed in.
Yes, it does.
I don't know how that really works.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, anybody who really knows how to make this stuff work, they've got too much pride to be working for the corporate media. They're going to be working in film and TV series. I mean, if you're going into a corporate media outlet, you're going into a very sleazy, scammy, the Ministry of Truth, Goebbels kind of situation, and so they're going to get the less skilled people, and it shows in the quality of work.
And I haven't had a chance to call since the election, Mike, but I've been listening to you for a long, long time now. I know what Hillary, how she helped out your career. And a couple of times I've actually woke up in the middle of the night, rolled over, and got me a good laugh just thinking about you. And this couldn't have worked out any better, especially when we know now that she had a total meltdown on election night and went full Chucky on her staff. And I just don't think this could have worked out any better.
Well, I think
I'm sure you get a little bit of satisfaction out of it.
Oh, yeah, I'll be very honest. I got a great deal of satisfaction out of her defeat. And I'm sure way back in 1994, they just thought that if they'd wreck my career, I'd go away and offend no more. And obviously, that was a classic bad judgment call by somebody. Because, you don't destroy somebody's career and then give them a lot of free time to devise, a response, which is essentially what happened. And so, I'm deriving a huge amount of satisfaction out of Hillary's downfall, but it's not over. I want to see her in jail. I want to see the Clintons stripped of their ill-gotten wealth and forced to live like poor people, because nothing hurts a money junkie more than taking their money away from them. It's even worse than death or prison, to make them poor again. Okay? Thanks an awful lot for the phone call, Clint. We got to let you go for our station identification, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And Sam is in our control room today, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Getting on back to this whole fake news, where the biggest liars on the planet are pointing to the independent media and saying, you can't trust them, you can't trust them, really. And yes, we lied to you, but they're official lies, and that makes it okay. They're telling you unofficial versions of things, and that can't be tolerated here. The New York Times, in its lead editorial on Sunday, decried the digital virus called fake news and is openly calling for internet censorship. Now, before the New York Times or any other corporate media outlet starts talking about fake news, I demand, and you should demand, a full acknowledgement and public apology for telling us Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, that Assad had weapons of mass destruction, that Iran is making weapons of mass destruction, that there were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, no weapons on the Lusitania, no Spanish mine in Havana Harbor that blew up the USS Maine, and the thousands of other blatant lies used by the corporate media to trick the American people into wars and out of their money. The corporate media does not have the moral right to stand up and talk about what is real and what is fake until it owns its own deceptions and apologizes for them publicly. NBC went on a rant about fake news. Oh, those fake news people. MSNBC's Chuck Todd did a segment about the fight against fake news. They just travel like wildfire online and they're accepted for fact. Then MSNBC turns around and puts out the following headline. Reince Priebus on Muslim registry, quote, not going to rule out anything, end quote. Which makes it look like the Republicans are considering a registry of Muslims only, right? This is coming from MSNBC. What Priebus actually said is, look, I'm not going to rule out anything, but we're not going to have a registry based on a religion. That's what he actually said. So here we have NBC at the same time, they're condemning the independent media for not going along with the official view, declaring us all to be fake news, and they're caught with another fake headline. I mean, it really is ridiculous. Now, WikiLeaks did come out with that list of prostitutes and correspondents who colluded with the Clinton campaign. ABC, Bloomberg, CBS, CNBC, CNN, a lot of people from CNN, the Daily Beast, the Huffington Post, MSNBC, New Republic, New York Times, New Yorker, People, Politico, The Guardian, and on and on and on and on. That's what's going on with all of this stuff. Now, we put up a video. Oh, we've got John from Barbados on the line. John, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes, I've noticed that if we try to call out the corporate media, it doesn't matter whether it's news media or TV, BBC, CNN, they're very reluctant to actually post your comments. In fact, we're being completely blanked. especially when you point out all the lies that they've told over the years. It's ridiculous.
I know.
But anyway,
First of all, I'm already banned as a commenter on places like Reuters and they don't want to hear from me. And I've noticed more and more the stories will come on out and they'll have about 5 comments that appear to support whatever the agenda of the piece is, and then they'll say comments are now closed.
Well, yes, I mean, I take pride in being actually banned from several and many websites because of it.
Yes.
But what I wanted to talk to you about was my idea the other day of closing all military bases, because I think you are entirely incorrect. At the moment, during the Second World War, there was about 1.8 million people to be returned, military, into a much smaller economy than you have now. And that economy was actually still basically in a war situation, manufacturing material for the war effort. And that had to be changed as well. So bringing those home suddenly would be difficult. However, today's much larger economy, there's only 360,000 troops in foreign bases, and most of those are professionals. They're not due to be demobilized anytime soon. They've signed on for 5 years, 10 years, however many years. So a lot of them would actually be returned and still remain in the military. Very few of them would actually be demobilized. And actually leaving them overseas would make no difference, because the same number are coming to the end of their term and would be demobilized. So it doesn't matter whether you leave them in foreign lands or bring them back to America. The same number will be demobilizing and going into the civilian marketplace. But what I wanted to say was that, with this number of troops, a lot of things could be done, like securing the southern border of the U.S.
That would definitely be a very, very good thing for them to be doing. My concern is that our economy today may be larger in terms of the numbers, the gross domestic product, but we are nowhere near the manufacturing power that we were at the end of World War II. And so we're bringing these people back, and we're creating jobs just to keep them occupied, jobs that don't produce anything. And that's become a big part of our problem, is in order to keep people employed, and they're not very good at that, they're constantly creating new jobs, about regulations, and putting stickers on things that are not actually productive jobs and don't result in a saleable product that we can reverse the balance of trade with. And it's a big problem. I need to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. We're talking still about politics, wars, economics, and, of course, the war by the corporate media on the independent media to try and somehow denounce us as the fake news after corporate media told us all that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, Assad had weapons of mass destruction, Iran is making weapons of mass destruction. There's only a 6% jobless rate in this country, even though there's actually 94 million Americans out of work right now, unable to find jobs here. Anyway, John, let's wrap this up because I got a bunch more news I need to get into. But the bottom line is that I think these other nations are tired of U.S. military bases on their soil, and I think when the leases expire, they're not going to want to renew, and so we're going to bring these people back. And even the soldiers who are mercenaries, I presume that their contract has an option for early termination in the event of peace. So
yeah, well, I would presume so, but most of the military now, doesn't matter whether it's the UK military, American military, they are professional soldiers. They are in for a term limit. Unlike
but I don't know about how it is in Great Britain, but here in the United States of America, it is perfectly at the military's discretion to just say we don't need you anymore, and you're being let go. There, if you sign a 5-year contract with the military in this country, it's binding on you, but not on the U.S. government, and that's the way it is. Anyway, John, I got to let you go. I want to get back to this campaign by corporate media to try and demonize and tarnish the independent media. We have this YouTube video about this German journalist who's out there blowing the whistle, how even over in Germany, the CIA controls their media to control what the German people are being told, and it's another indicator of who the real fake news is. Now, former CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson is currently writing a book that talks about the influences brought to bear on corporate media. She used to be with CBS, and she was let go over a misunderstanding regarding just how much bovine excrement she was supposed to be shoveling at the people. She's an Emmy Award winner. This is a very credible person, and she's out there talking about not just the corporate media lies, but how astroturfing is a major, major business now. And what she means by astroturfing is there are companies who, for a fee, will have legions of people or software pretending to be people going on out to comment boards to say, oh, yes, I think this is really a great idea, to artificially create the illusion of popular support for an idea. And it isn't real. It isn't real at all. There are companies that will actually manufacture fake letter-writing campaigns to fool members of Congress into thinking their constituents want a certain policy. And I remember seeing one of these companies many years ago, and it was just this big office, and they had cubby holes all over the wall with different kinds of paper, different kinds of envelope, stationery with kitties or flowers or butterflies on it, and they had these electronic printers set up with all these multiple fonts to mimic different kinds of typewriters and even handwriting. And they would get a contract to say, we need to convince this member of Congress that the majority of his constituents support rubbing blue mud in their navels on Wednesdays. And so they would create this massive pile of letters. They had a system to go on out and mail them in multiple locations all over the congressman's home district, so the postmarks would look correct. Congressman would come into his office, see a big stack of mail, and have no clue it originated from a single bought and paid for office. The degree of fraud is absolutely astounding out there. And they dare to call us the fake news. I reposted my article on Mockingbird. It's one I wrote some years ago. And Mockingbird is the code word for the CIA's subversion of the free press. Now, right now, they're bashing Russia Today because it's partly supported by the Russian government. Therefore, you can't trust it. Well, BBC is supported by the British government. Are you saying we shouldn't trust them? No, that's different. The British are the good guys. The Russians are the bad guys. Get with the program. What's wrong with you? But basically, the lies coming out of the American corporate media are more insidious because we are raised from childhood to believe that the corporate media is operating independently of the government. And we know now that is not true. Starting at the end of World War II and inspired by how Hitler's propaganda machine controlled their corporate media, the CIA embarked on Operation Mockingbird, which was to make sure that the top executive at all of the corporate media was a CIA asset. And the corporate media since then has been lying to us all while denying the very fact of the lie itself. Now, Snopes more and more is starting to destroy its own credibility as the ultimate arbiter of what's true and false on the Internet. And I've noticed over the years, inevitably, they follow the government's point of view on whatever's going on. But apparently, their primary writer, a girl named Kim LaCapria, is openly out there saying she's a liberal, she's a feminist, and before she worked for Snopes, she wrote for Inquisitor, which is known for publishing fake quotes and downright hoaxes. That's her background. And even at Inquisitor, Kim showed a clear bias. Now, I've noticed lately Snopes has been using and overusing the label unproven on stories that cast doubt on the liberal political elite. Now, from my point of view, unproven is as good as saying, I don't really know, which makes you wonder why Kim is bothering to even create a page. Now, in one recent case, Kim dismissed the report by votefraud.org that 3 million non-citizens had voted in this general election, even though votefraud.org made a compelling case from their analysis of election records. In other words, Kim declares something unproven based on her refusal to accept the data. Snopes has also been embarrassed on reporting on the Trump University without fact-checking their sources about that. Now then, Kanye West is out there blasting the media in an epic rant rant, and he is also using the Matrix metaphor. It is time for the American people to wake up and realize they have been lied to all their lives by the corporate media. It's not occasionally, it's constant. It's business as usual. One lie after the other, after the other, after the other. Crazed lone nut assassin. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. The U.S.'s liberty was just an honest mistake. Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. And the American people, apparently at least 94% of them, have now woke up and realized the corporate media is a propaganda machine for its corporate owners and for the government. Now, one thing we have to be very, very careful about in this war between the corporate media and the independent media, the corporate media isn't going to change. They're paid the big amounts of money they're paid because they have been, up until recently, successful liars. If they stop lying, they stop making those big bucks. They're not going to change despite all of these recent faux, repentant editorials about, oh, we promised to do better, which really means they promised to try and hide the evidence of their lies a little bit better. But what they can do is try and discredit the independent media by planting phony stories online and hoping people will pick them up. One that went on out there was this hoax story where George Soros had died of a heart attack over the weekend, and of course it gets on out there, and then the corporate media says, oh, those silly people in the independent media, Soros is fine. See, you can't trust anything you see in the independent media. So everybody needs to be careful. Now, the other one that's been making the rounds is called Pizzagate. And this one smelled of a setup right from day one, in particular because of the flood of emails I got from people saying, you absolutely must put this on your website. Well, anytime somebody says that to me, the first thing I do is throw on the brakes good and hard and take a very, very careful look. And earlier today, I found indications Pizzagate is a poison the well propaganda attack, because I found an article, posted it to WhatReallyHappened.com, where they're out there saying, you wouldn't believe what those independent media fools are thinking now that Hillary is part of a pedophile network, and they're the same people who claim that she was rigging the Democratic primaries and rigging the election and that she was using her email server for nefarious purposes. And that's how a poison the well attack works. You come up with something that is nonsensical and easy to disprove, and you throw it in with the real reporting of the real crimes, and you stir it all up, then you blow the lid off the hoax, the fraud, and then say, see, all of this stuff is worthless. That's a poison the well attack. When Pizzagate is exposed as a complete hoax and a fraud, the corporate media is going to try and use it not only to smear the independent media as not checking their facts, but also to say, well, see, everything the independent media said about Hillary and her email server, that's probably just as fake, just as nonsensical. Stealing the elections, just as nonsensical. Pay for play at the Clinton Foundation. See, it was all a bunch of nonsense from those wackos over there in the independent media, and you shouldn't pay any attention to them. So be very careful, because right now, the only weapon the corporate media has right now is planting fake stories on the independent media. And just be aware of that. Be very, very careful. Because the other side loves to play dirty. They think it's their divine right. The corporate media feels like they're fighting for their very survival, at least those super high paychecks they've been getting. And they'll do anything to keep the money flowing. If they had any moral fiber, if they had any ethics at all, they wouldn't be liars for the corporate media in the first place. Now, the world is ready for alternatives to the controlled social media. There's a new free speech social network, Gab, that is going to take the place of Twitter. It's already up. It's already swamped. You actually have to wait a short while to have your account enabled, because they're having to buy new servers as fast as they can. And there's a new alternative to Facebook called Scene Life. And I've already set up accounts on both of these, and I'm already starting to do the majority of my social media posting on these alternatives. And I'm already getting huge numbers of followers. So apparently a lot of people are following us over into these non-Facebook, non-Twitter, non-controlled, at least so far, alternatives to social media. And I think that's a very, very good thing. So far, not a single thing I've posted has been taken down or altered or hidden or criticized or anything. So it's time to move on. If we don't like how Facebook has been playing the game, we can go to Scene Life. If we don't like how Twitter has been deleting accounts and censoring us, we can go to Gab. We don't like how Google tracks us and biases search engine results based on political expediency, we can go to Yandex. There are ways to break loose from the enslavers. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're getting some additional information about this 7.3 magnitude earthquake that just struck in the ocean just off Fukushima in Japan. They are issuing tsunami warnings for the whole coastline of eastern Japan. They're saying that the tsunami is expected to reach 3 meters tall. That is serious, serious weather. We're not under any tsunami threat here in Hawaii so far. They're saying it's not going to happen. But there is a concern. First of all, a quake of that magnitude is going to shake that set of ruined reactors very hard and possibly cause more of the material to settle down to the very, very bottom. But the real danger is if a tsunami comes on shore and it floods the remains of the reactors, the portions that are above the natural water table, because it is on a coastline, that could actually trigger an increase in the spontaneous fission taking place in those reactor cores. So when you have an operating reactor, the water that's in there is not only there to transfer the heat away to the turbines, but it acts to slow the neutrons so that they can be captured by other uranium atoms. If you absolutely drain a reactor core, the fission stops. Now, decay residual heat will still melt it. So you can see what a problem that can be. But if the remains of those ruined cores down in the ground are fissioning, but they're not soaking in water under the water table, and a tsunami comes on in, you could see a real spike in fission taking off. Won't explode. The fuel is not enriched enough to actually support detonation. But it could get really, really ugly in terms of the radiation that's coming on out of there. All righty. Somebody just wrote on in and said, if you want an example of fake news, remember how the BBC reported that World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed more than 20 minutes before it actually happened. There's a good example of fake news right there. It's a good reminder. And by the way, there's been another study released that says it would have been impossible for World Trade Center Building number 7 to collapse only from fire. And no steel frame building ever collapsed just from fire before 9/11 or since. And building number 7, because it housed government offices, was built much more sturdily than the normal building code. It was built to survive bombings. And the idea that all the load-bearing members failed all at the same time just from a fire, it never made sense. And there's more fake news for you. Now, turning over to the war zones, over at nationalinterest.org, John McCain is out there still bloviating about how President-elect Trump shouldn't trust this former KGB agent who's plunged his country into tyranny and murdered his political opponents and invaded his neighbors. Well, to indicate McCain's degree of hysteria here, first of all, a lot of our politicians are former intelligence agents themselves. Do you want to demonize all of them? Second, Russia is not under tyranny, not since the end of the Soviet Union. There is no evidence Putin has murdered his political opponents, unlike the Clintons. And Putin hasn't invaded anybody. McCain is still out there saying, oh, he invaded and he stole Crimea. No, he didn't. Crimea voted to leave the Ukraine following the U.S.-backed coup d'etat, and then voted a second time to ask to merge with the Russian republics. That's what happened. And McCain is still out there saying that Russia attempted to undermine America's elections, which doesn't make any sense, because they were out there saying that Putin's a friend of Trump. Putin's going to try and rig the elections for Donald Trump, and yet every detected incident of election fraud favored Hillary Clinton. McCain is just not dealing with reality out there. Now, the popular mobilization units in Iraq, following the liberation of the Tal Afar Air Base, they've launched an operation to liberate the key town of Tal Afar from the ISIS terrorist group. Now, when they succeed, and it looks like they will, the ISIS group will be completely cut off from all aid, support, and reinforcement from its allies in Syria, or for that matter, Washington, D.C. Got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the war zones now. And apparently hostilities between India and Pakistan are now escalating. And apparently India shelled Kashmir and, along with all the other damage, killed 3 children. That does not look well in the world press, does not look very good to anybody when that sort of thing happens. Now, there's been a little bit of an embarrassment over at Whitehall. Apparently, some internal working papers have been released through the British Freedom of Information Act, and they were made public thanks to Chris Lamb, who's from Bristol, and he took 2 years in court for the right to look at these memos. And what these memos demonstrate is the Chilcot inquiry, right from the start, was all about not finding anybody to blame for Great Britain getting into the war in Iraq. Now, remember the Downing Street memo where it came on out that Tony Blair was literally telling them that he and George W. Bush had already made the decision, we're going to go to war in Iraq. We have to fix the propaganda around that agenda. And so the Chilcot report, which has been long delayed and basically was useless, and now we have the internal memo saying that's what it was designed to do. That's the purpose of any official investigation, is to duck responsibility for what happened or find a convenient scapegoat. Now, over in France, their corporate media is now dealing with their Hillary moment because they've been writing off Marine Le Pen, saying, yeah, she's out there, but yeah, we don't need to pay attention to her. She just took a huge lead in the French presidential election poll, and Sarkozy is conceding defeat in the first Republican primary and switching the support to Phil on. So it looks like Marine Le Pen may actually be France's president in the final elections, which is only going to pour more salt into Hillary's wounds. Good. Italy's government is now on the verge of collapse, and they're starting to describe what's going on in Europe in terms of Donald Trump's surprise upset election. And they're now calling Italy the next Trumpian domino to fall. And basically, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi has said that he will not stay in office if a referendum he seeks does not pass. And the polls are showing the referendum will fail. So, once again, everybody is decrying the rise of populism. Where do these people get this idea that they should choose the policies of the nation? Now, at the Spain Interfaith Summit, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian clergy united to denounce violence and to basically promote lives of mutual respect. And a Hamas-linked imam and the chief rabbi of Israel have united in a call for peace. I don't think we would have seen that happen if Hillary had won the election. Now, let's talk about America's military might that John McCain thinks is ready to take on the world. We have been talking for a long time about how the military-industrial complex is producing the most expensive weapons in the world, but recent displays alongside Russia's weapons in places like Syria and Iraq are making it very obvious that U.S. weapons aren't really very good. They're being built specifically to suck money out of your pocket, put it in the pockets of the defense contractors, who will then repay the favor by making big, huge donations to Congress's war hawks. This is the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address. And it's not the only one. We have a security-industrial complex. We have a medical-industrial complex. These are segments of our society and economy that are so large and powerful, they're influencing the nation's policy in their own interests and not for the common good. So we've been talking about this epic display of disasters. Israel just had an embarrassment. They had a drone fly in over their northern border, shot at it 3 times, twice with Patriots and once with an air-to-air missile, missed all 3 times. We've been talking about the problems with the F-22 and how it's still having problems asphyxiating its pilots, and its ceiling, its operational ceiling, is now artificially lowered. The pilots are not allowed to fly above a certain altitude, not because the plane can't do it, but because the pilots can't. There's the Independence-class littoral combat ships that have serious corrosion problems. There's the Freedom-class littoral combat ships that have got drivetrain problems. The Gerald R. Ford, filled with whiz-bang technology, has already been declared it may never actually be suitable to use in a real war. But it makes a great display in a naval museum someplace. And then there's our favorite, the F-35. Now, the F-35 is the most expensive procurement program in Pentagon history. Major cost overruns, schedule delays, and all the performance reviews are negative. It's actually been set up to dogfight 1970s vintage fighters, and it loses. It's way too heavy from all the whiz-bang technology. It's not as fast or maneuverable in a dogfight situation. Can't fly in the fog, can't fly in the rain, can't fly too close to lightning. The software for the cannon is not going to be available until 2019. The helmet system that is supposed to be the centerpiece of fire control and the sensor suite is still not working. And those helmets cost something like $400,000 each and have to be custom fitted to the pilot. One of the technologies they're having problems with is the radars on a squadron of F-35s are supposed to network together and share information. But so far, it's unable to correctly integrate targets. And so there'll be a single target out there, and what is on the display of all the fighters are multiple targets, each one being a slightly different radar return from the other planes. There's a technology that's supposed to be the glass fuselage, which has TV cameras all over the outside of the F-35, so that when the pilot looks around with that display in his helmet, he can see what's in that direction as if the aircraft were not really there. They can't get those images to fuse correctly. And it goes on and on and on. Engines exploding on takeoff. The insulation in the fuel tanks is flaking off and clogging the fuel injectors in the engines. Now, the Air Force declared the F-35 ready for combat not too long ago. And everybody was saying, are you really sure about it? And according to this article over in the Rumor Mills News, there's a memo issued from the Pentagon's top testing official, largely based on the Air Force's own test data of the F-35, showing that the Air Force's declaration that it's ready for combat was wildly premature, and in fact declaring that the F-35 may never be ready for actual combat. But it'll look really cool in the aviation museums. Looks great on the runway, doesn't it? Or hanging up there on the ceiling. Over $1 trillion has been poured into this one project. Now imagine what you could do with $1 trillion just dumped onto the American people. You could certainly wipe out all the student loan debt. You could provide adequate housing for all of the nation's homeless people. But no, we need this new whiz-bang aircraft that is already inferior, obsolete, when compared to the latest generation of Chinese and Russian fighters. Because in Russia and China, when they build a weapon, it's to make a weapon. They get a lot more bang for their buck. And this is a warning to everybody who's out there saying, well, we're invincible because we spend so much on the weapons of war, we can never be beaten. Well, it doesn't matter how much you're spending if it's going for waste. And I keep referring back to this movie, The Pentagon Wars. And it opens where they're in this congressional hearing about the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And all of this is based on a true story, by the way. And the officer in charge of the weapons procurement program for the Bradley is out there saying, we won the Cold War because we could shovel the money into the fire faster than the Russians. And really kind of ridiculous stuff. And they talk about, I mean, the whole movie is about this whole Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, which was hugely expensive and never did any of the things it was supposed to do very well. And if you haven't seen it, I understand it's out there someplace, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Netflix, and it is a funny movie. It's a very funny movie. Richard Benjamin directed it. And again, it's based on a true story. It's based on a book that was written by one of the officers who was in the Bradley development program who tried to get it back under control and ultimately was driven out of the Pentagon because the Pentagon doesn't want cost-conscious people. They just want to keep that little money machine going. So let's talk about the economy a little bit. We have a credit bubble. That's how they made the economy look good going into the election. Money was easy to come by. And unfortunately, it was marked by totally crazy lending. This according to an article out of Investment Watch blog. And in a lot of ways, this is a repeat of what happened all the way back during the first savings and loan bailout under George Herbert Walker Bush, where the rules were loosened and these S&Ls started making these incredibly insane investments that just didn't work out. Now, some of them were being used as money laundry, money growing systems by the CIA's gun and drug running operation. And I've gone through that story before. I'm not going to go into it today. But a lot of it was just reckless, the money is flowing, we're going to have fun. And we seem to have been in a repeat. During this credit bubble that was run up to make the economy look good for the election, there was some crazy lending. We've got to loan this money out. What are we going to loan it on? Oh, there's a guy here who wants a drive-through car wash for elephants. All right, sounds like a good idea. Loan him the money. And there's going to be a major blow-up of defaults when it all comes apart. And I do feel sorry for Donald Trump in one way. There really isn't anything that he can do that's going to stop a major economic crash. And like Herbert Hoover, he's going to get blamed for it. When it all happens next year or the year after, you're going to see Obama out there saying, well, I left the economy in great shape. It's not my fault. Doesn't go on my historical legacy. They did the same thing to Herbert Hoover. Now, the euro is plunging between all the talk of Brexit, Frexit, Quiddly, and the rest of it. The single currency is in trouble right now. And there are warnings coming out of the Express in Great Britain. The single currency could actually collapse against the U.S. dollar. It's in the middle of a record losing streak. And you could see some of these Eurozone nations be forced to go back on their own currencies. We know that when Brexit was first being talked about, Germany actually printed up new Deutschmarks. They've got them in a warehouse ready to go just in case. It was a smart thing to do. Now, Volkswagen, because of the economy and its self-created scandals, is seeing a major plunge in sales. They're looking at massive cuts in order just to stay in business. 30,000 jobs about to be pink-slipped at Volkswagen. DuPont is freezing their payments to their pension plan for 13,000 employees. And basically, the original pension plan called for annual increases for those employees that they had accumulated the longer they worked for DuPont. And now, all of a sudden, that's gone. DuPont is apparently having to cut costs somewhere, and the first thing they cheat is their own employees. Remember Abercrombie and Fitch? They used to be kind of sort of a high-style store. Then they went kind of camp. They came out with some very controversial catalogs with some very suggestive photography, and they actually were very well done. But it didn't work. People are now shunning that brand, that name, and Abercrombie and Fitch is getting ready to close hundreds of their stores. This going into the holiday shopping season. And it's not just the high-end brands like Abercrombie and Fitch. The CEO of Gap is saying they're expecting this to be a very grim holiday season. They have had 7 continuous quarters of declining sales. Because when you take away all the people's money, when you take away their ability to earn decent wages and salaries, they stop going to the shopping malls. And why nobody in our economic system, nobody in our government could think about that in this rush to offshore our jobs is just astounding. They got caught up in this, we're going for globalism, we're going to offshore, we're going to lower America to third world status. Well, unfortunately, we don't have third world prices in those shopping malls, do we? And that's where it all fell apart. Your employees are also your customers. If you let your employees go, your customers go with them. And that is just an ironclad rule of retail. I mean, the Christmas decorations have been up for weeks now. And I'm already getting I'm getting into Ebenezer Scrooge mode already. I just don't want to deal with it anymore. And it does make a mockery of it. It really does. It's not really a religious holiday anymore. It's not even a celebration. It's just another mind trick to flog more money out of the American consumer. Or even better, plunge them further into debt slavery. We're now hearing that there are stores that are openly going to be discriminating against cash customers. Oh, no, you want the card. You want our card. That's where we make our money, debt slavery. We don't make our money off of this Chinese stuff that we're selling. Meanwhile, the U.S. Mint has halted further production of 2016 Silver Eagles. Well, we're close enough to the end of the year. Maybe they're retooling for the 2017. But again, we're seeing a clear bias in our economic system against ordinary people owning precious metals. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go to the telephones here and speak with Tom in Texas. Tom, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael. Got a question. Have you heard any of the strange going on here in central Texas? I'll tell you what I've seen today and heard today and see if you have heard anything about it. About 70 miles north of San Angelo, traveling, traffic got backed up for an hour, figured it was a big wreck or something. By the time we got up there, there was no wreck. They had a Greyhound bus pulled over. Several police from different cities, several sheriff's departments pulled over. You know, out there, guns pulled, stuff like that. That wasn't the strange part. There was also several military people with an APC in an aggressive posture. They had the bus pulled over, all the baggage unpacked, all that stuff. Military working dogs.
Yeah.
You know, they sniffed drugs, but they also sniffed bombs. I thought, well, maybe that's it. Though the APC was kind of a strange scene. So then travel on down to San Angelo, like I say, 7 miles farther south, 70 miles, not 7. And we get there and we get the gas and talking to the guy there. He said, yeah, that's kind of strange because Goodfellow Air Base has been locked down all day. You can't get in or get out.
Well, I don't know. I've heard nothing about this. Could be a drill. Could be that somebody came on out and said we think there's a terror attack. I mean, earlier in the show we were reporting on how the FBI sent a message to all the police departments saying be on the lookout for terror attacks on Thanksgiving in the shopping malls, and they don't actually have any indicators. They're just out there with the usual fear mongering. So I do know that overall military activity in terms of training and practice and everything does seem to be up because obviously here on the island of Oahu we have the highest per capita density of military bases of any state in the country, and it's pretty hard to miss it when they're out there flying their fighters and helicopters everything back and forth, or tooling around Pearl Harbor.
Hopefully you're right. It's just some training exercise and not something stupid.
Oh,
Anyway,
all right. Well,
you and your wife, y'all have a good day.
all right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here as well. Now, getting on back to the news here, as I mentioned before, the euro is in sharp decline right now. People are talking about literally a collapse against the U.S. dollar because of all that's going on. And there's an article that came out of Russia today. Is the French Prime Minister correct to say Europe could die? And apparently at a forum in Berlin, French Prime Minister Manuel Valls lobbed a rhetorical grenade when he warned Europe could die. In other words, the European Union could break up. And he made a point in his speech telling Germany they've got to invest more to boost growth across the EU or face the consequences. Now, there's a problem there. Ever since the European Union came along and the European Central Bank started plundering nations like Greece and Italy and all these other countries, Germany has been expected to step in and cover the shortfalls to prop up the rest of the EU. And they shared that burden with Great Britain, which was one of the reasons the people of Britain voted for a Brexit. So, once Great Britain leaves, Germany is being expected to literally prop up the economy of the entire European Union all by itself, and the German people don't want to go along with that. We'll be back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And before we go back to the phones here, we're getting an update from the earthquake right off of Fukushima. And the big one, of course, was a 7.4. They've now said it's a 7.4. And there have been about 5 aftershocks, slightly lesser. But they're already reporting tsunami waves coming ashore in Japan, some 3 foot high. They're warning that the second and third waves could possibly be higher. Apparently, some of them are going to be 10 feet high as well. So we're keeping an eye on that. There is, at this time, no tsunami warning here in the state of Hawaii, which is good for us. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Ken in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I wanted to check to see if, in fact, the threat level was lowered after the election.
I heard.
And if so, go ahead.
Yeah, I said I heard that it had been. I don't have a way to get the threat right now. I mean, some segments of the military are always in a heightened state of alert. Anyway, the crews of the SSBNs are functionally at DEFCON 2 all the time. So, but my understanding is that the actual threat level has been reduced following Trump's election. The big problem, of course, is that those people who still want that hot war with Russia could do anything in the next 60 days to get that war going. And I think this provocation by Ukraine, where they sent agents into Crimea, kidnapped 2 Russian soldiers, and they're going to put them on show trials, I think that's designed to provoke a Russian response. But I don't think Putin's going to bite. He's just going to wait until Trump is in the White House, and then Trump's going to call over to Ukraine and say, you let these guys go, or we cut off the funds.
Yeah, my thing is that the people that wanted, they're really hot and mad about having Hillary in are the primary targets of a Putin assault, namely the cities like New York, Washington, D.C., Hawaii. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, so, I think to get the war going with Russia, what are they going to do that's going to make it look convincing? I mean, at the time when, for example, when Japan was getting ready to attack Pearl Harbor, everybody knew there was a state of animosity on the part of Japan. Roosevelt had been goading them all during 1941 with this secret plan developed by Office of Naval Intelligence Lieutenant Commander Arthur H. McCollum. The American people didn't know that. It was supposed to be a big, big surprise. But there were headlines in the newspapers saying possibility of war. But in the case with Russia, where Putin has repeatedly demonstrated that he doesn't want a war. He went into Syria. He brokered that deal to get rid of Syria's chemical weapons. He's shown himself to be a statesman over and over again. The American people who no longer trust and believe the corporate media see that it's people like John McCain who are out there saying, we want this war, we want this war, we want you to pay for it and you to die in it, but I want this war.
Yeah. Well, keep up the good work, and thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
And have a good Thanksgiving.
Same to you. Happy Turkey Days to you, too, as well. Okay, now then, moving on here. We were talking about French Prime Minister Manuel Valls, who's out there saying it is entirely realistic that the European Union could fall apart. Now, he's calling on Germany to spend more of its money to prop up the failing EU, at the same time that he poured scorn on Merkel's immigration policy, saying that Europe needs to say more clearly who can and cannot enter and stay. Obviously, that I agree with, and it's certainly the sentiment that helped put Donald Trump on the path to the White House. By the way, Merkel has declared she is going to stand for re-election for a fourth term in the next German elections, and we will have twice as many vote riggers as Hillary did. Another article coming on out from FortRuss.com. Safe spaces and Putin blaming will not save the European Atlanticists. And what they're basically saying is that this idea of globalism or regionalism or unionism, it's falling apart. The EU is falling apart. The North American Union never even got out of the starting gate. The globalist agenda is in serious trouble because everywhere the agenda is implemented, the quality of life for ordinary people goes down. And apparently part of the liberal fantasy about the New World Order in globalism was that we could all be convinced that living a much simpler lifestyle would be a good thing because we were saving planet Earth and so forth and so on. And it didn't work out that way. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about how globalism seems to be collapsing. The European Union is showing signs of fracturing in the very, very near future. And again, I've said this before about the refugee crisis. The New World Order people, George Soros and all those people who think they want a single global government and envision their particular rear end polishing the seat on that golden throne of planet Earth, they just really thought they were going to pour all these refugees into Europe, all the refugees and illegal immigrants into the United States, and we were all going to hug each other and sing Kumbaya around the campfire and toasting marshmallows, and it did not work. And again, it goes back to this reality that the entire liberal political philosophy is based on a fraud. The idea that you can re-engineer what's in the human mind by changing the environment around them. And it's a fraud. It's based on an intellectual fraud. It's based on a hoax book that was written to sell that idea, but it doesn't work in the real world. All right, I'm going to take a phone call. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. It's nice to talk to you. Since right before the election, I called you and let you know I was down here in South Florida, and Trump carried Florida. It was a wonderful thing, and he won the election. Awesome. But I want to say this, Michael. This Chucky Schmucky Schumer, this I call him the Zog, and Soros. This guy Schumer, he wants to bring in these illegals. And well, look at Israel, Michael. Israel has a wall around it. Why doesn't George Soros and Chucky Schumer flood Israel with 5 million Arabs? Why don't they bring 5 million Syrians into Israel? And then we'll see what Schmucky Schumer and Soros would think they'll do to Soros, and the Israeli government would like to do to him then. But,
well, hang on. Before you go any further, I want to respond what's going on, okay? What Schumer and Soros are doing is they're stripping the nations bordering Israel of their Arab populations and shoving them into Europe and into the United States of America to make it easier for Israel to invade and conquer those nations on its way to Eretz Israel.
Well, that's great. Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Michael. And, you know, looking at the Stasi, what's her name? Bazurkel. I call her Bazurkel.
Mm-hmm.
She's a Stasi, East German. She's literally trying to turn that nation of Germany into a Muslim enclave, like look at Turkey, you know, Ottoman Empire. I mean, it's unbelievable. And if the Germans are going to allow that, and like you were talking about, look at Marie Le Pen. I believe she may be the, I guess, the president of France, hopefully. Trump's proven anything can happen, like with Brexit. But you know what, Michael, right now, you have so much, what do you call white trash? Or who are these people are actually trying to destroy Western civilization?
Well, I don't know that they're trying to destroy Western civilization. They just have this dream in their head of how civilization would be a lot better with themselves in charge. Again, you get people who've got way too much money start to think that that money gives them some kind of a right to play with the earth and the human race as if they are toys. And I certainly don't go along with that. None of these people were elected by me to tell me how to live my life. And actually, I'm a big boy. I got some pretty strong ideas about how I should live my life anyway. Again, they're out there in their little fantasy world, and they're so disconnected from what real life is. I mean, that's certainly a big part of what doomed Hillary Clinton. She was listening to her computers and the voices in her head and thought it was all. I mean, they got a video of her celebrating on election night. She was convinced she had stolen the thing. And then, of course, when she found out otherwise, she beat up on John Podesta. Again, we have a serious problem with people who have come up with an ideology, and then they start to believe that it's the real world, and it isn't. And then there's an old psychiatric joke that neurotics build castles in the clouds, and the psychotics move in. And we seem to have that going on a lot. And again, I have to wonder how many of these people are on these prescription antidepressants, and they're not thinking clearly about what's really going on and whether or not what they're trying can work.
Well, Michael, I agree with you. I think quite a few of them are on medication. But getting back to Soros, paying these millennials, $1,500 a week to go protest and cause damage and all that, how come this guy's, well, who is this guy, Goldfinger? It's like this guy, Soros is like, he's trying to crash the world economy so he can be, I guess, the strongest, most powerful person on earth. And that's what it seems like he's trying to do to Soros.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's a super villain right out of a James Bond movie. Or the parallel I like to use is there was a Michael Caine movie called The $1 Billion Brain. It was sort of the end of the Ipcris File franchise. And the storyline was about this billionaire who just decided he wanted to have the U.S. go to war against Russia, and he was going to spend all this money and build this computer and get all of this stuff going. And in the end, he's undone because everybody who was feeding information into his computer was just typing in whatever they thought. They weren't going out and getting accurate information, and ultimately led to his demise. But again, we've seen in the real world where people that have huge amounts of money truly believe that they are elites, that God has favored them, and that therefore they have a right to go on out and make decisions for other people. Bill Gates is another one. He's out there screaming, we've got to reduce the world's population. We can use vaccines to do it. I don't think he's going to be too amenable to the idea that maybe Bill Gates, ought not to be reproducing right now. But that's been my argument against the population control people all along. I understand there's a population problem, and there always will be because sex is a lot more fun than dying. But my argument with the population reduction people is they always want somebody else to die early or somebody else to go without children. And they're never willing to actually address the problem by their own personal actions.
You're absolutely right, Michael, everything. One more thing I want to say is this, and I'll let you go. I know you got other callers. The 3 million, the 1 million that they say Hillary beat Trump by in the popular vote is a lie, because according to what I've been reading, I read it on Drudge, she won maybe the popular vote, but there's 3 million illegals that voted in this election. So if you take those 3 million away, Trump beat her by 2 million in the popular vote, because there's millions of illegals voting for Hillary and the Democrat Party. And let's get to the real fact of the matter here. If Drudge, and this is proven, Michael, you have all these illegals voting for the Democrats for the free handouts. And the Republicans hammer that home big time. All these new schmucks like Chucky Smucky Schumer and all these guys, well, Hillary won the popular vote. Well, she didn't win the Electoral College, Schumer. That moron, that guy's such a moron, that Schumer, makes me Oh my gosh, Michael.
Well, it's not just the 3 million non-citizens who voted according to votefraud.org. There's an estimated 1.2 million dead people voted. We have no idea how many of those computer systems, when you push the button for Donald Trump, it was actually registering for Hillary. That's the problem with our election system right now. It is designed to facilitate and conceal stolen elections, and we have 2 years to get it torn down and replaced with something common sense that is going to make detection of election fraud very easy. And we're going to have to back it up with some laws that say if you are caught trying to rig an election, you are going to go to jail and you are banned from holding public office.
Well, absolutely, Michael. One more thing. They control 2% of they're 2% of the population. They control 98% of the media. They'll figure it out. I mean, it's unbelievable what's happened here. But maybe Trump will smash all these things and he will drain that swamp, because the swamp definitely needs to be drained. And and I don't know how you're going to seed it, but it's definitely got to be drained out. And like I said, you got these schmucks that are got so much power for only being such a small of the population. It's just unbelievable to me. And well. To me, it's like Michael, one more thing. It's a miracle that Trump won the election. I pinch myself. I don't believe that he actually beat Hillary. But he did, so I hope wonderful things happen, and that's all I got to say, and I know you got other calls, so God bless you, and thank you for taking my call, sir.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go, Tom. And we do need to make an important point, okay? Because we have the Electoral College system, both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton planned their campaign around winning electors. If our president was chosen by popular vote, the campaigns would have been run much differently by both candidates. Donald Trump won by the rules everybody agreed to play by going in, and you don't get to change the rules when it's all over just because you don't like the outcome. If the popular vote were that important, Donald Trump would have probably won there as well. And we do know 3 million non-citizens voted, 1.2 million dead people voted. We still are unable to get any verification about the electronic voting that was going on. We know that in many precincts, machines were openly seen voting for Hillary Clinton when the button for Donald Trump was pushed, and to their credit, those precinct workers took the machines out of service and went back to the paper ballots. But our election system is a joke. It shows the world we are not a democracy. We're another banana republic with rigged elections. But this time, and Bev Harris has confirmed, there is tremendous amounts of evidence of election fraud by the part of Hillary's campaign, but they didn't have enough to overcome a landslide. No election fraud can overcome a landslide. It didn't work with the Remain people trying to rig the election against Brexit, and it didn't work with Hillary trying to rig the election against Donald Trump. And what we need to do is we need to start finding the people who facilitate election fraud, and we need to make examples out of them. We need to put them in jail. If you go into a 7-Eleven and you try and steal a 6-pack of beer, you're going to go to prison for a while. If you try and steal an election, nothing happens to you. Do you not see the inequity in that? Now then, let's talk about the immigrants and refugees. 60 Minutes went to Sweden to do a segment showing how great the refugees are, and gee, we can't understand why the people of Europe are having such a fuss about the flood of refugees coming in. The crew, the 60 Minutes crew, got attacked by the refugees, trying to smash the camera, trying to kick the sound guy, attacking the host. Yeah, you got to look at that video. Talk about manufacturing fake news. Apparently in Germany, refugees burned down one of their asylum centers. Burned it down on Ramadan. Apparently their complaint was there wasn't enough Nutella to go around. So they rioted and burned down the asylum center. Now there's a little bit of good news out there. The Justice Department has agreed to halt their push for amnesty because they know it's going to go nowhere under President Trump. And so if Obama thought he was going to get his amnesty to put on his legacy in his last days in office. He's not going to get it. Not going to get it at all. Now, you've probably been hearing how the mayors of all these so-called sanctuary cities are out there saying, we're not going to cooperate. We're going to keep our illegal immigrants and refugees here. We don't have to cooperate with you. And President-elect Trump has come on out and said, you're absolutely right. You don't have to cooperate with me, and I don't have to send you $650 billion in funding, do I? So that ought to calm things down there a little bit. Now, as you know, there is a war by the corporate media, not just against the independent media, but against foreign media, especially Russian media. And over in the EU, they're taking steps to make sure that Russia Today doesn't get access anymore. Remember that big stink that came out of the State Department when they declared Russia Today to be not the equal of the American media, for daring to ask what proof the U.S. had Russia was bombing hospitals. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so there is a think tank over in Great Britain, the Henry Jackson Society, which is now recommending that European parliaments introduce new legislation to require all politicians to file reports about any appearances they have in the Russian media. And this is, again, the corporate media is going on an attack against anybody who's calling out their lies. And so both the Russian media and the independent media are in their gun sights right now. And they're basically panicking. And apparently this whole issue was prompted by the Sputnik news agency quoting a British politician who was saying that the murder of Joe Cox appeared to be a political assassination to influence the Brexit vote, which a lot of people at the time suspected was going to be the case, including yours truly. But how dare you say that? How dare you? And we're seeing the true commitment to freedom of speech all across the European governments, the European Parliament, the European Commission, which has the real power and authority, and within our own government. They don't want freedom of speech. They only want to have freedom of speech for themselves, to feed you the lies that will get you to think what they want you to think. And they're way too late. They're way too late. They're not going to get back the trust and faith of the American people, even if they succeed in shutting down the independent media, which I don't think they can do. There's simply too many of us. There have been efforts to try and crack down on internet sites that report on government wrongdoing. People find ways around it. A lot of it moves to the darknet now. Now, Turkey is rethinking the talk about merging with the European Union. They're looking at the current economic realities of the European Union. They're looking at the refugee crisis and all the damage it's causing. And they're now starting to say, well, we're interested in a new power alliance with Russia and China. So Turkey is now going to pivot to Russia. And our foreign policy, in part, thanks to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, has been a disaster. It's been one whoopsie after the other, after the other, after the other. Now, let's talk about here in the United States. The Dakota Access Pipeline is becoming a major sore point for a lot of people, a major embarrassment to the Dakota Access Pipeline Company, and even to our government. At one point, Obama said he was going to intervene and tell the pipeline company to find a different route. The pipeline company came on back and said, under no circumstances will we change this route at all, even though we don't have all the paperwork yet. And this company has been caught failing to report when they stumble across archaeological materials in their diggings. And that's a requirement under the law. Now the Dakota Access Pipeline Company is going to court to try and get a court decision that their operation on this pipeline cannot be influenced by outside political pressure. I don't know what will happen if that's ever actually put to the test. But over the weekend, there was a major confrontation on a highway bridge involving the police, the Sioux, and the police were using tear gas, concussion grenades, rubber bullets. They were hosing these people down with water cannons in freezing weather. And apparently the police were threatening to use the LRADs. Now, the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's Emergency Medical Services deployed to treat dozens of individuals with injuries. Apparently, one child was shot in the face. This is another wounded knee getting ready to happen. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're getting an update from the Fukushima power station. Apparently following this morning's 7.4, 7.3 quake, depending upon who's reporting it, the cooling system, the emergency cooling system at reactor number 3 failed. Stopped circulating water to keep it from melting itself any more than it already has. TEPCO says they got the system restarted about an hour and a half later, but it's obviously an area of concern. And with all the quakes that are happening, was the 7.4 the worst, or is it possibly a foreshock for another one on the order of what caused the original disaster? We don't really know. Now, getting on back to the Dakota Access Pipeline, we're seeing unrestrained police brutality against these people protesting over the misuse of their land. And apparently what happened is, through various bureaucratic shenanigans, the land that belonged to the Sioux tribe by treaty was taken for some environmental reason and then turned around and leased to this company for the pipeline. And the Native Americans are feeling like they were cheated and that maybe they shouldn't have been quite so welcoming to those pilgrims back during Thanksgiving, all those centuries ago. But apparently the police were using, again, water cannon on these people in freezing cold weather and stun grenades. They were using stun grenades. Now, the police are saying they had to do this because there was a riot, but it was the police who started the riot. And 167 people have been injured. It was even described as a war zone. And the people in the reservation are concerned that this pipeline is a threat to their safe water supply, and we know pipelines break, pipelines leak. We've had a couple of bad ones over in the southeastern United States lately. We all remember the Deepwater Horizon disaster. It's a real concern. And there's a valid concern over their sacred lands. And before you start getting into this, sacred lands thing. Now, imagine the Dakota Access Pipeline wanted to bulldoze your cemetery behind your church where your family is buried. How would you feel about that? Because that's exactly what's going on here. And then there's the issue of the archaeological sites. Now, under U.S. law, all construction is required. When they stumble across any kind of an archaeological remain, they must halt for the site to be evaluated and possibly excavated by archaeologists to preserve the history there. And the Dakota Access Pipeline Company has been caught ignoring that and simply bulldozing on through archaeological sites. And these sites represent the history of those people. Again, let's put it in another context. Pipeline company wants to bulldoze through Stonehenge or your neighborhood church or the National Archives. Just roll over that Declaration of Independence because we've got to make money here. Now, over in Albuquerque, there's a big stink going on, and it's the after effect of this horrible tragedy on March 16th, 2014, when Albuquerque police officers just executed this homeless guy, James Boyd, for illegal camping. He was out camping in the wild, but apparently he was on land that was owned by the government or something. And the police went up there, and one of them was actually caught on video saying, "I'm just going to kill the guy." And it was caught on an officer's body cam, which led to now retired Officer Keith Sandy and Officer Dominique Perez being charged with murder. And this homeless guy was suffering from schizophrenia. It's not like this was somebody who really represented a threat. And it triggered a firestorm of backlash against police and a nationwide demand for cops to wear body cameras and document everything. Now, apparently, though, the Albuquerque police have been caught deleting and altering and editing those videos in order to support the police officer's version of whatever happened. And the videos are from several different cases of officer problems, including 2 additional police shootings. Well, you know, the videos disappeared. We don't know where they went, so we're just going to presume the officers are telling the truth here. Now, here's a story that really annoyed me. Apparently, there was this family traveling on a flight into Phoenix, and for some reason, the flight to Phoenix was running late. Now, this family was on their way to meet the remains of their son who was killed in combat. It's a Gold Star family. And when the plane landed, the crew was concerned about the family missing their connecting flight. So the captain made an announcement saying that all the passengers had to remain seated and let this special military family exit the aircraft first. And apparently the passengers in first class, you know, the money junkies, began to boo and complain. Now, I find that absolutely disgusting. Whether you agree with the wars or not, and I do not, we owe those people who put on that uniform our respect. And we owe the families of those killed and crippled in combat our kindness, our consideration. And for those people in first class to just start booing, "I'm a money junkie. I've got to get where I'm going. I'm an important person here. You know, your kid's dead anyway. You can wait." I remember on Claire and my recent trip to Santa Claus, Indiana. I kid you not, that's the name of the town. I remember when we were getting on board the plane, we had trouble getting on board the plane because we had to go through the first class section, and they're already being poured wine and beer and champagne, and you know, and the flight attendants are literally blocking the aisles. You know, us steerage class passengers couldn't get to our seats because the first class people had to be made drunk before takeoff. Didn't exactly paint a very, very pretty picture. Now, a lot of you are probably already aware of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, and you're aware that Israel does not like it very much. They're trying to have it made illegal, even though it is a protected expression of protest under the First Amendment. Boycotts are protected free speech. But as it turns out, supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement may have saved a lot of lives, because the Sabra dipping company that makes the line of hummus products has had to recall a huge amount of their products over a possible listeria contamination. And Sabra is on the BDS list. So if you were not buying Sabra for reasons of BDS, then you are not at risk for having come down with listeria. Now, all of us are dealing with our smartphone issues. Mine is starting to act up. I don't want to have to replace it, but it's starting to say, "I'm getting old and cantankerous." But there is a problem, apparently, with the low-end Android devices that are being made by companies that are shipping these phones with back doors built into the firmware. And researchers from CryptoWire have discovered a secret backdoor in the firmware of Chinese firm Shanghai Adapts Technology Company Limited. And researchers have found another similar thing in a company, products from a company called Regentech Group. And, you know, I'm about ready to ditch my cell phone and go back to one of those old dial rotary phones that sit on the desk. They really have become far more trouble than they're worth. Turning into a Luddite. All right, the first major winter storm of the year is moving across northern United States. Has caused 2 deaths and hundreds of crashes so far. And it's the first heavy snow of the year. There has been snow earlier, but this is the first heavy, gonna stick, be around till spring snow. Over in Oklahoma, West Virginia, they had the first weekend of the college football season was snowed. And so there were pictures of all the football players playing in the white fluffy stuff. Now, scientists who are not connected with Al Gore's global warming scam are now saying that, yes, the Old Farmer's Almanac was right. There's going to be a hard freeze and the coldest winter for the last 5 years. Now, they keep talking about the polar vortex, and they do it in a way to make it look like this is something unexpected and new, and, well, you know, we thought the world was warming, but that polar vortex really surprised us. There's always a polar vortex. There's one over the North Pole, there's one over the South Pole. It's the result of Coriolis effect. And yes, it swivels around a little bit as the Earth changes its alignment with the sun. Remember the big deal they made over the hole in the ozone over Antarctica? Oh my goodness, there's a hole in the ozone, we're going to die and we've got to do... And then they did some research and found out that hole was always there. Wasn't new, wasn't an emergence. Remember when they banned, you know, spray cans? You know, the chemical that was in them, some kind of fluorocarbon, I think, was in there. Oh, it goes up there and it destroys ozone and it never goes away. And they banned all of that. Turned out the ozone hole was there all along. More fake news. Now, a little bit of good news, and again, I agree with this. Donald Trump is expected to slash NASA's climate change budget in favor of actually doing spaceflight again. He wants to send humans back to the moon and beyond. We certainly need a reliable space launch system that is not based on engines we have to import from Russia. Donald Trump is convinced human-caused global warming is a hoax. And he wants to have NASA go back to actually doing space missions. Now, right now, with the last one that went on the last big success, there's actually nothing on the drawing boards for like 2 years. There's one more mission going to Mars, but after that, it's a big desert. Trump is going to change that. And I think we should send humans back to the moon. I think we ought to look at a permanent base. I think we need our own way to get up to the space station, maybe make a bigger space station, and we ought to be seriously looking at going to Mars. Not because I want to see the American flag on the moon, or Mars, or anywhere else, but because I am old enough to remember the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s was born in the technology incubator of the Apollo moon program. Now, our government over the last couple of decades has very foolishly allowed our lead in manufacturing of high tech to be taken over by other countries, like China. And these other countries are not going to be so foolish as to hand it back. So to rebuild America's manufacturing greatness, we need to leapfrog forward. We need to go past what is being done now and find the next thing. Photonics. Nanotubes. Something useful we can do with aerogel. Improvements in 3D printing, which is a coming thing right now. We need to do that. And in solving the problems related to going back to the moon, or to Mars, or just up to our space station, we're going to come up with new materials, new processes, new technologies that will be the foundation of these new products and industries. Everything that you see in front of you, the microchips in your computers, the smartphones, the digital watches, all of that technology was born in the Apollo Moon program. We need another one. And so I'm absolutely 100% on board with Donald Trump with his retasking of NASA. I absolutely agree with him on that one. Now, do you remember the Zika virus? Zika's coming to get you. And it all originated with this epidemic of hypocephalic babies down in Brazil that were being born approximately 1 year after a government-mandated vaccination campaign for pregnant women. But, of course, we can never blame vaccines for causing any harm whatsoever. So it was declared that the Zika virus was the cause of the microcephalic babies. And the Zika is carried by mosquitoes, and we need eradication programs. And the scientists in Brazil were saying where the microcephalic babies were being born and where the Zika virus was didn't line up. And Zika's been around for at least 70 years without producing any of these symptoms. But the corporate media had their villain. It's the Zika virus. It's not the vaccines. And they did a big scare campaign, and they launched all these mosquito eradication programs. In Florida, the governor of the state was found to have an economic link to the company that got the contract to eradicate the mosquitoes carrying Zika. And in the process, they eradicated honeybees, which Monsanto was really grateful for. But it was all reckless. And now the World Health Organization is saying, actually, it's not an emergency. It doesn't actually cause that much harm. The CDC said that most humans will self-immunize to Zika on its introduction. It's like Zika is its own vaccine. Zika is carried by the same mosquitoes that carry dengue. You know, and it's almost like a classic, we made you look. You know, we found our scapegoat to protect the vaccine companies, and now that we're sort of past that crisis, it was never a big deal anyway. And still, the corporate media is out there declaring that the independent media, and for that matter, Sputnik and Russia Today, are the fake news. They're all fake news. Anybody who doesn't love vaccines, that's got to be fake news. Anybody who thinks GMO is dangerous, that's the fake news. So, it's a bit of a problem. Now, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, Dr. Alveda King, is defending the appointment of Jeff Sessions. And she's saying basically from where she sits, the Democrats overplayed the race card to the point where everybody stopped listening to them. We know that Soros was funding all of this Black Lives Matter, trying to fan up racial tension so that Hillary could pose as the candidate who would protect the black people from the white people and protect the illegal immigrants. And the American people just didn't want that. We'll be right back with our last segment of the show today. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Monday of Thanksgiving week here. We've got time to take one more phone call. Fran in Washington. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha nui nui, Michael.
Aloha nui nui.
Yeah. I emailed you a link, as long as you're on the subject of vaccinations. I emailed you a link from like Health Ranger or Natural News or something about the CDC has had to admit that they know thimerosal causes autism. And that's all I've got today.
Well, that's enough here. I mean, what was amazing is there was a lot of research that was being done that had shown thimerosal was causing autism, which led to the FDA's decision to ban it. But for some reason, the pharmaceutical companies are still using it, and the FDA is not taking any action. What did happen is in the Homeland Security Act, the legislation that created the Department of Homeland Security, there was actually a rider on there to indemnify vaccine makers from damage. They cannot be sued for harm their products cause. If you believe that you are harmed by a vaccine, there's the vaccine court that you can go to. And the vaccine court, 9 times out of 10, is going to say you're just making this stuff up. But even in cases where it's obvious that the vaccines have caused damage, there'll be a settlement and a payment, but it's covered by the taxpayers. not by the vaccine companies. And the rationale for this was that in the event of a biological terror attack, the vaccine makers had to be assured that, they wouldn't be sued if they made a mistake in their rush to come up with a vaccine. Well, I think if that were the case, they could have written the writer to say, when dealing with a biological terror attack, the vaccine companies are indemnified. But they didn't say that. They simply said the vaccine makers are indemnified, period, blanket coverage. And as a result, whenever you remove the incentive for a better quality product, you're going to get worse quality products. We saw that with the early indemnification of the computer industry, hardware and software, to protect them from lawsuits from badly designed products. And here we are all these years later dealing with hardware that's flaky, software that is sold, with thousands of problems in the box, and they rely on us to find and fix the problems for ourselves. And one of the things I'd like to see Donald Trump do, if we can get him a Congress that will work with him on this, is to bring back product liability and simply say any company that makes and sells a defective product can be sued for it, whether it's a computer hardware company, a software company, or a vaccine maker. We cannot have these giant corporations held above the law, or we're going to get the kind of abuses we have seen. Okay, Fran?
That's all I got, Mike. Yeah, honey. Have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and we're almost to the very, very end of the show. And apparently Saturday Night Live is now flipping over to conservative. They actually did a skit to mock liberals. And by the way, there was this funny video over the weekend. It's a phony commercial for a charity to sponsor a millennial because they can't take care of themselves. They have no job skills, and they're just poor and suffering. And for only $2,900 a month, you can support one of these poor, starving millennials. And it was just hilarious, and I'm going to put it up to the front of the page again as soon as this show is over. So, again, a reminder, we are live today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. Thursday and Friday, we're giving our overworked and underpaid control room crew Thanksgiving off. And Lady Claire will be with us here on Wednesday. So there's the music. Have yourself a good evening. We'll be back here on the Republic Broadcasting Network tomorrow. Until then, please remember, you are all members of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.